"Look out!" yelled Teddy. "We've got to save him," cried Sammy. Their first alarm was lest they themselves break through the ice and go under, which, if they did, might mean that all three would drown, for there was no help near. But after the first cracking, the ice remained solid, and a quick, frightened glance on the part of the two lads showed them that it was an air hole into which Tommy had plunged. "Can you see him?" asked Teddy, as he came to a pause, after having skated toward shore. I'm afraid he's gone under the ice," answered Sammy, in a frightened voice, as he stood beside his chum. There was a sudden commotion in the water, and in among the pieces of ice that filled the water hole, and then the head of Tommy TipTop bobbed into view. "There he is!" shouted Teddy. "Grab him!" yelled Sammy. Keep back, fellows!" gasped Tommy, as soon as he could get his breath. You may go in, too. I touched bottom with my feet and came up." His teeth were chattering with the chill, but he managed to grasp the edge of the ice at the hole and hold on. "Keep back!" he cried again, as Teddy and Sammy, having quickly taken off their skates, started toward him. No use in everybody going in. Get some fence rails, and then I can get out." "That's the idea," exclaimed Teddy. "Fence rails. Can you hold on, Tommy?" I'm going to try," replied the brave lad, but don't be any longer than you can help. It's cold here." "I guess it is," agreed Sammy, as he and Teddy ran for the shore, near which there was a fence. They quickly pulled off 2 top rails and hastened back to their chum, who was still clinging to the edges of the ice at the air hole. As they neared him, there was another cracking sound, and they started back in alarm, but it was merely a piece of ice breaking off from where Tommy had hold. "He's going down again!" yelled Teddy in alarm. "Oh, Tommy!" cried Sammy. "What shall we do?" I'm all right," was their chum's answer, as he still held on with one hand and made another grasp for firmer ice with the fingers that had slipped off when the treacherous frozen stuff crumbled. "Shove out those fence rails," ordered Sammy. "Do you mean across the hole?" asked Teddy. "Sure, right across. Then he can get hold of 'em and lift himself out." The next instant, the two lads had thrust the rails toward Tommy, and across the hole through which he had fallen. He knew how to use them, and letting go of his hold on the ice, he thrust his arms across the rails. The sticks were long, and brought his weight on the thicker part of the ice. Tommy got the rails under his armpits. Then he worked himself up in the water until he could put his hands on the rails. Next, he raised one knee, got it over one stick, and a moment later he was kneeling on the 2, the water pouring from him in streams as it ran out of his clothing. Teddy and Sammy wanted to rush forward to pull him out of danger, but Tommy waved them back with a dripping hand. It may not be safe," he cried. "I can get out now," and once more his teeth chattered with the cold. He made his way along the rails until he stood on firm ice. Then he suddenly fell down. He had slipped. "Off with his skates," cried Teddy. "We've got to warm him up. Make him run." Fortunately, it was not very cold, and Tommy's garments did not begin to freeze when he came out of the water. Still, he was in great danger, and his chums knew that. In a few seconds, they had his skates off and assisted him to his feet. "Now you've got to run, as if you were going to tie the score in a baseball game," ordered Teddy. "Yes, or as if you were making a touchdown against the Milton 11, added Sammy, as he strapped his chum's skates in with his own. "Run as hard as you can, Tommy. That's the way to get your blood in circulation." I know it," chattered poor Tommy. "Go ahead. I'm with you." Teddy took one arm and Sammy the other, and with their chum between them, they started to run down the snow-covered road toward Riverdale. At first Tommy could scarcely move, so heavy with water were his clothes, but as this dripped off, the garments became lighter in weight, and he could step out better. "You're not half running," cried Teddy after a bit. "No, make better time," advised Sammy. I can't seem to do it," said their chum. They looked at him in alarm. He was very pale, and they knew he must be suffering and having a chill. "Oh, if only we had some way of getting him home in a hurry," spoke Teddy as he looked around. They were on a lonely stretch of road. Suddenly, from behind them, came the jingle of sleigh bells, and a moment later there swung into view a man in a cutter, drawn by a fast horse. "We've got to stop him," said Teddy. "Sure thing," agreed Sammy. "Oh, don't. I don't want to bother," spoke the dripping lad. "Bother? That's no bother," said Sammy. Teddy and he got ready to signal the man in the cutter to stop when he came opposite them. But there was no need, for the driver drew up his horse of his own accord. "What's the matter, boys?" he asked, and they saw that it was Mr. Wentworth, the hardware man. "Tommy fell in. We were skating. It was an air hole," explained Sammy quickly. "He ought to be taken home," added Teddy. "Of course he had, and that as soon as possible," agreed Mr. Wentworth. "Here, put him in my cutter, and I'll wrap the fur robes around him. Then, Bess, you've got to go as you never did before," he added to his horse. "But I'll get your cutter all wet," objected Tommy, shivering. "As if I cared for that. You boys are among my best customers in sporting goods, and it's a pity I wouldn't do you a favor. Hop in here, Tommy TipTop, or I'll never sell you another football at half price. Hop in." Tommy managed to get in with the help of his chums, and Mr. Wentworth covered the lad with the warm robes, making him sit down in the bottom of the cutter. "Sorry I haven't room for you," he said to the two boys. "Oh, we won't mind," answered Teddy. "We're not wet, and we can skate back," added Sammy. "I have just been up to the island camp," went on the hardware man. "I'm going to spend a few days there in about a week." "We were just going to have a look at it when Tommy fell in," said Teddy. I'll see it later," chattered Tommy from under the fur robes. "Now, you just keep quiet, Tommy," ordered Mr. Wentworth with a laugh. "Keep good and warm, and hold on, for you're going to have a fast ride." He spoke to the fine horse that started off on the trot, and soon Sammy and Teddy were left behind. They put on their skates and glided down the frozen river to where their companions were still racing away, all unaware of what had happened to Tommy. The two rescuers soon told the story. Meanwhile, Mr. Wentworth was making good time toward Tommy's home. When he reached it, Mrs. TipTop, seeing from a window the cutter stopping in front of her door, rushed out. "Oh, what has happened?" she cried. "Where is Tommy?" "Here, Ma," chattered her son. I fell in the river. I'm all right." "Oh, my poor boy." "He'll be all right," exclaimed the hardware man. "Get him to bed right away. Hot irons, hot water bags, hot lemonade to drink, all he can take of it. Everything hot. That's the only way to keep off a cold." There was considerable excitement in the TipTop household for the next few minutes. Several neighbors came in to help Mrs. TipTop, and with the aid of them all, Tommy was put in bed with warm bricks, warm flat irons, and hot water bags all about him, while he was made to drink so much hot lemonade that he felt as if he was swimming again. Then the doctor, who had been hastily summoned, came in and said the treatment was just right. He gave Tommy a powder and promised to call the next day. Tommy slept well that night, but in the morning, in spite of all that had been done for him, he awakened with a bad cold. He had to have medical treatment, be kept in a warm room, and of course could not go to school, which he regretted very much, for he was fond of study. Several of his chums called on him, but they could not see him. For a while Tommy was quite ill, and his parents were much worried. The boys, too, missed him in their winter sports. "It isn't the same without Tommy," remarked Teddy, one day after a snowball fight. "No, he sort of does things," agreed Joey. "I hope he'll soon be well," spoke Teddy. "Say, you fellows must think Tommy TipTop is about all there is," sneered Sam Belton, who overheard the talk. "Well, he can beat you at ice boat racing," replied Sammy. "He cannot, not with the way I've got my boat fixed now. I'll race him any time." "Well, he won't race you," said Teddy, and Sam went off rather angry. Tommy slowly got well. He was allowed to sit up and then walk around his room. The boys were allowed to see him, and they kept him informed about matters that interested him. "Is the ice still good?" asked Tommy one afternoon, as he pushed aside a pile of books so that Teddy and Sammy might find a place to sit down on his couch in the attic room where our hero had his den. "Yes. Why, do you want to fall through again?" asked Sammy. No, but I'm going to make one of those things, and I want a chance to try it, replied Tommy, as he pointed to a picture in one of the books. What is it? Asked Teddy. It's an ice glider. You make a sort of sail, almost like the one on our ice boat, only not so large. Then you take hold of the stick in it, have the sail at your back, and you can slide along on your skates without moving your feet. It turns you into an ice boat, you see. Say, that's great, cried Sammy. I'm going to make one, went on Tommy, and by the time I'm able to go out, I'll have it ready. It'll be fun. The two chums agreed with him, and then began talking about the best way to make a glider. The next day, by the consent of the doctor, Tommy was allowed to have some bamboo poles, some cloth, and a number of tools up in his room. He at once began work on his ice glider, and got along well with it. Say, that's fine, cried Teddy, as they viewed it a few days later. Tommy had made a sail, shaped somewhat like the kind called leg of mutton, being triangular. It was taller than he was, and if he held it at his back, in a good wind, and stood upright on his skates, he would probably be blown along at good speed. I'm going to try it day after tomorrow, said Tommy. The doctor said I could be out then. I wish I'd made one, remarked Sammy, as he tested the ice glider in the room by waving it about his head. Tommy's glider was such a success, when he tried it a day or so later, that all the other boys wanted one, and a number of them made the queer sails that sent them over the ice on their skates. Races were arranged, and all their spare time out of school the boys spent on the ice having fun. It's almost as good as the ice boat, declared Teddy Bunker, as he glided around in a big circle. Look out where you're going, Georgie, yelled Herbert Kress at his thin friend. You'll knock me down. I can't stop, answered Georgie, who had a rather large ice glider. I can't stop myself. Get out of my way. He was sliding toward a group of boys, making desperate efforts to halt, but he could not. They began to scatter to give him a free path, but just then Joey Grubb, who had laid aside his glider, tripped and fell, right in the path of the oncoming Georgie. Don't run into me! Don't jab me with your skates, begged Joey, as he began rolling over to get out of the way. He won't hurt you if he jabs you, said Tommy with a laugh. You're so fat, and you have so many clothes on, Joey. Well, I don't want to be jabbed just the same. There was a chorus of laughter, and then a sudden puff of wind sent Georgie spinning around, and all at once, down he went with a jar, sliding toward Joey, who was vainly trying to get out of the way. There was a collision between the lads, and when Georgie had finally let go of his sail and gotten to his feet, Joey said in grieved tones, There! I told you not to jab me with your skates. Well, it was only the flat runner part and not the points that hit you, spoke Georgie. Besides, I couldn't help it. Oh, Joey, you're not hurt, declared Tommy. Forget all about it. Come on, let's have a race with the wind. Then we'll skate back, build a fire and get warm. Let's see who wins. This suited everyone, and soon the lads with the ice gliders were lined up. They held them so as not to catch the wind until the word to go was given, and then they slewed them around at their backs. We're off, cried Tommy, as the wind caught his sail. He had fully recovered from his cold, and his chums were glad of it, for he could be with them again. First one lad would be ahead, and then another, as the wind blew with different force on the sails. There was not much that one could do to give himself an advantage. Merely wait, and let the wind carry him. Joey's going to win, cried Teddy, as the stout lad shot ahead when near the finish mark. No, I think Mortimer Manchester is, declared Billy. Joey's heavier, and when he gets going, he's hard to stop, went on Teddy. Yes, but Mortimer has a big name, and that carries him along, was Billy Ruggler's answer, amid a chorus of laughter. There came a strong puff of wind, and several of the boys in the rear shot ahead, but they could not overcome the advantage Joey had secured, and he easily won. Now for a good skate back and a warm fire, cried Tommy, and the boys, folding up their sails, so as not to be hampered with them, raced back. They were so warm that they hardly needed a fire, but they made one from driftwood that was along the river's shore and danced about it in glee. We'll try the ice boat again tomorrow, suggested Tommy, but their plans had to be changed, for that night there was a big snowstorm that covered the ice of the river and put an end to skating gliding, and sailing. "But we can have some more snowball fights and go coasting," remarked Tommy, on his way to school the next morning with several of his chums, as they raced about, shouting and laughing, as the snowflakes came down faster and faster. "And we'll make a snow fort and have a regular battle," proposed Frank Bonder. This idea was carried out, and the boys had the biggest snow fight of the season. Tommy was chosen to lead the forces against those in the fort, and after a hard struggle, he captured the stronghold, hauled down the flag of the defenders, and put up his own. "Well, this is as good as ice boating," cried Teddy, who belonged to the victorious party. "Let's have another fight tomorrow, and we'll take the fort and let Sammy's crowd fight us." This was done, and for several days snow fights were in order. The boys took care to break no more of the schoolhouse windows. By this time, the snow on several hills had been so well packed that coasting was good. Sleds and bobs were brought out, and the boys and girls too, for that matter, had more jolly times. "I wish we girls could ride on the big bob that you boys have, Tommy," said Nellie one day. "You only let us on the small ones, or on our own sleds." "Yes, I think it would be fun to go on the big one," spoke Sally Grubb. "I'm not afraid." "All right, we'll give you a chance," promised Tommy, and he and his chums did. Working together, they had made a fine large bob, Tommy using a sled that had been given him for Christmas. It had a real steering wheel, a warning bell, and the long board was covered with carpet. There were also side rests for the feet. "Oh, this is lovely, isn't it, Sally?" exclaimed Nellie, after their first coast down a moderately steep hill. "Beautiful," was her chum's opinion, and they had many more rides. For the boys found out that the girls were not half as fussy as they feared they would be, not even when the bob upset in a snowbank. "I'd like to take the bob down Armstrong's Hill," said Tommy one day, when they coasted in their usual place. "That's a long and steep one." "It's too long and steep," declared Teddy. "I wouldn't want to take a chance." "I would," said Tommy again, but as the other boys were against the plan, Tommy did not insist on it. However, he made up his mind that sooner or later he would coast down Armstrong's Hill. This was about a mile out of town. Tommy's chance came sooner than he expected, but not in just the way he thought it would. One Saturday morning, his mother asked him to take a message to a friend who lived in the next town. The nearest way was along the road that led over Armstrong's Hill, and as Tommy was trudging up it, he was hailed by a man in a bobsled, drawn by 2 horses up the long slope. "Want a lift?" asked the man. "Thanks, I'd be glad of it," replied Tommy as he got in. He delivered his message, and walking back, came to the top of the hill. Near it was a house, and in front of it a number of children were playing with a large old-fashioned sled. All at once a plan came into Tommy's mind. "If I could borrow that sled, I'd coast down Armstrong's Hill," he said to himself. "I'm going to chance it. It will be something to do. Say," he went on, addressing an older lad, "I'll give you 5 cents for the loan of your sled to slide down that hill." "All right," agreed the boy, quickly taking the money Tommy held out. "Oh, don't you do it, Petey," objected his sister. "Why not?" asked Tommy. "Are you afraid I won't bring the sled back?" "No, but it's dangerous. A boy got his arm broken sliding down this hill one day. We never do it." "Well, I'm going to try," declared Tommy, as he took the sled rope from the boy's hand. "You needn't walk back with it," spoke the lad, who had quickly pocketed the nickel. "Leave it at the bottom of the hill, out of the way of teams, and I'll walk down and get it." "That's a good idea," declared Tommy, as he drew the sled to the edge of the hill. "Oh, I wouldn't let him do it," exclaimed the sister again. "That's the easiest way to make a nickel I ever saw," declared the boy. "He can have 2 rides for that." "Oh, one's enough," answered Tommy with a laugh. He looked down the long, steep hill. Now that he was on the point of coasting it, he rather felt like backing out. It seemed bigger than when he had ridden up it. The road ran down straight and true, and it was well worn, being icy in some places. "Here goes!" exclaimed our hero, finally, as he laid face downward on the sled, sticking his feet out behind him so that he might steer. "Goodbye," he called to the children. As they answered him, and he pushed off, he heard the girl say, "I wouldn't have done it if I had been you, Petey." "Oh, I guess he knows how to coast," answered the boy. The next moment, Tommy was off, coasting down the hill at ever-increasing speed. The wind cut his cheeks, little particles of ice and snow flew up in his face, and he held on desperately, using his feet, first on one side and then the other, to keep himself in the middle of the road. Say, this is going some, thought Tommy. I never believed I'd ride so fast as this. I can't stop if I want to. I wonder what'll I do when I meet a team. He looked down, but there was nothing in sight. The road was clear, and Tommy was glad of it. Faster and faster he went, the runners of the sled scraping over the ice and snow. He had covered half the distance to the bottom when, glancing ahead, he saw a team starting up the slope of the long hill. I wonder if I can beat them out, he thought. There's more room to turn aside down there. On and on he went. The team, drawing a heavy sled, was beginning the ascent. Tommy tested the steering qualities of his sled by swerving it first to one side and then the other. It answered very well. I guess I'm all right, he remarked aloud. When he spoke, he was sorry that he had done so, for a shower of icy flakes flew into his opened mouth. Mustn't do that again, he thought. He looked ahead once more. The team was farther up. Tommy was rapidly nearing the bottom of the slope. He was going like the wind now, and he knew he could never stop himself. Just in front of him, he saw a bump in the road. Thank-you-ma'ams, the country people call them. They are ridges made to carry off the water in a rain, and it is said they are called thank-you-ma'ams because you must never use that expression in going over them. Otherwise you will bite your tongue, for the ridges bounce you up in the air violently. That is what the one did for Tommy. His sled struck it. Up he went, and when he came down, he was only half on the sled. He had a fear lest he roll off under the feet of the approaching horses. He heard a shout, then another one. Then he felt himself flying through the air. Next he knew, he was falling down, 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 as if into a bed of feathers. I'm in a snowbank, thought Tommy. Then he knew nothing more, for all grew dark around him, though he seemed to be resting easily. Think he's coming around all right? I guess so. He must have hit his head a bump on the sled when he went over that thank-you-ma'am. You're right. There, he's opening his eyes. Tommy TipTop heard these words as in a daze, after his flying leap into the snowbank. He looked up and saw two men bending over him. Then he noticed that he was lying on the bottom of a large double sled. It was the one he had seen coming up the hill. "Oh, what happened?" asked Tommy faintly. "You happened," answered one of the men with a smile. "You and your sled parted company rather suddenly. I guess you were trying to get out of the way of my team." "That's right," answered Tommy, as his head became clearer and he remembered what had happened. "I did try to steer out of the way." "You didn't need to," went on the teamster. "There was lots of room for you to pass." "But it was a foolish thing to coast down Armstrong's Hill," put in the other man, and Tommy noticed that he carried a gun and wore a hunting coat. "I never knew but one boy to do it, and he got a broken arm." "There doesn't seem to be anything the matter with this lad, though," put in the teamster. "How do you feel, Sonny?" "Pretty good. Is the sled broken?" "No, that's all right. Lucky you haven't any bones broken. Who are you?" Tommy told him and added, But I coasted down, didn't I?" He felt rather proud of that fact, though he was beginning to realize that he had done a foolish thing. "Yes, you got down all right. That is as far as the thank you, ma'am," said the hunter with a laugh. "How did you come to try it?" Tommy related how it had come about, and then, as he gradually felt better, he sat up and was soon able to walk about. He found the sled, where it had run up against the roadside fence after he had fallen off, and gone down into the snowbank. He placed it where the boy who owned it could easily see it. In fact, the boy to whom he gave the 5 cents was already on his way down the hill, for he had seen the accident. "Did I go in the snowbank very deep?" asked Tommy, as he thanked his rescuers. "Pretty deep," replied the teamster. "Jack Fordyce and I had to use our hands to dig you out. Lucky the snow was soft. But are you sure you're not hurt?" Tommy was very sure, and as the teamster climbed up on the seat of his sled and was about to drive off, the lad noticed a pair of snowshoes strapped across the back of the man who wore the hunting coat, and who had been called Jack Fordyce. "Are you an Indian?" asked Tommy quickly. and he heard the departing teamster laugh. And yet Tommy had an excuse for asking, for the man had a very dark color. He was dressed as Indians often are, and he had the snowshoes. "No, I'm not an Indian," was the reply, "though I make my living the way they used to when they were around these parts. I'm plain Jack Fordyce, muskrat trapper. I have heard it said that there is Indian blood in our family, quite a way back. But if you're all right, I'll be getting along. I've got to go to the store for some supplies. Have to start out early tomorrow morning to see if I've got anything in my traps." "Did you make those snowshoes?" asked Tommy, as he walked part of the way with the trapper. The boy who owned the sled had taken it away, looking, meanwhile, admiringly at Tommy. "Yes, I made 'em," was the answer. "I have to use 'em along the creek and river bottoms, where the snow is soft." "I wish I had a pair," went on Tommy. "Are they hard to make?" "Well, yes, they are, pretty middlin' hard, and unless you've had some practice at it," replied the trapper. "It's hard to bend the wood and hard to lace the thongs in, and then after you've made 'em, it's hard to walk on 'em until you learn." "I believe I could do it," said Tommy, rubbing the place where his head had hit on the sled. "I wouldn't advise you to try," returned Mr. Fordyce. "When I was a boy, the first pair of snowshoes I had were made from barrel staves. Why don't you try that kind? They're easy to make and not hard to use. Just take the widest barrel staves you can find, fasten some straps to 'em, in the middle, or even some strips of leather. Fasten your foot down by the straps, and there you are. Of course you can't walk very well on 'em, but you can sort of slide along over the snow, and you'll be held up a good deal better than if you didn't have 'em. Why, I remember once I made quite a trip on a pair of barrel-stave snowshoes, when, if I hadn't had 'em, I could hardly have got along. The snow was so deep that I'd have gone in up to my hips at every step. You take my advice and make barrel-stave snowshoes." "I will," decided Tommy. "Are you sure you can get home all right?" asked the trapper, as he was about to separate from Tommy. "Oh, sure, I'm all right. I don't mind a knock like that. I'm used to 'em. I play football, you know." "Well, then, I guess you are used to 'em," agreed Mr. Fordyce with a smile. Tommy did not say much about his accident when he got home, merely mentioning his long coast, and saying he had fallen off the sled. But in a few days the story was all around the village, and Tommy was quite a hero. That is, until his sister Nellie heard of it and told her mother. Then Mrs. TipTop, realizing the danger her son had so narrowly escaped, insisted that he never do such a thing again. She made Tommy promise, and he did. "Now for my barrel-stave snowshoes," he exclaimed a little while after this occurrence. "I'm going to make a pair and show the other fellows how to walk on the snow crust." "Oh, dear! What next?" exclaimed Mrs. TipTop. Tommy found a barrel that had several wide staves, and taking two of the best, he soon had leather straps made fast to them. It was not as easy as he had imagined to make the thongs fast, but he finally succeeded, and then he went out to try the odd snowshoes. He had trouble almost the first thing as he tripped, and had hard work getting up again, but he finally succeeded in making his way on the long pieces of wood and could do fairly well. Now he was ready to show the other boys, and soon most of his chums had the novel kind of snowshoes. Then they arranged walking tours and had some races. A few of the boys, who lived some distance out in the country, wore their snowshoes to school. The weather continued wintry. There was a thaw, and the snow disappeared. The boys laid aside the barrel staves and took to their skates, ice gliders, and the ice boat, having many good times. "I say, fellows," cried Tommy one day, "what's the matter with having another hockey game? We've all got sticks now, and I have a fine new rubber puck that Dad bought for me. I know how to play the game better now, too." "All right, I'm with you," spoke Sammy. "Same here," added Teddy, and the others agreed that a hockey game would be just the thing. The boys played better than they had before, and as all of them had the regulation curved sticks, they were better able to direct the rubber disc. Once again, Tommy was captain of one side, but his opponent this time was Teddy. The game was fiercely contested, and for a time it looked as if Tommy's side would lose. Our hero was everywhere, blocking the puck, getting it away from his goal time after time and rushing the other players, on several occasions taking it right out from under their noses. But in spite of this, he could not do it all, and he had poor support. At length, however, when Tommy needed one goal to win, he saw his chance. Herbert Kress had gotten the disc through a throng of players and was skating with it right toward Tommy's goal. "This is my chance," thought our hero. Skating up with all his force, he got in just ahead of Herbert. With his curved stick, he fairly stole the puck away from his opponent. Then, whirling quickly about, with a fierce stroke, he sent it toward the opposite goal. "Take it, Sammy! Take it!" cried Tommy, as he stumbled and went down on the ice. "I've got it!" yelled Sammy, and with a sudden swoop, he got to the disc ahead of everyone else. And with a skillful stroke, he sent it between the goal stones, winning the game. "That makes up for that time when we lost," panted Tommy, as his side gathered about him cheering. They played hockey several days after this, sometimes one side winning, and again the other. Then came a big snowstorm. It began early in the morning, lasted all day, and at night was still coming down heavily. Going soon got bad, the trolley line hardly being able to keep open for traffic. "We'll have snow enough now," exclaimed Tommy, as he came home from school. "Plenty of sidewalks to shovel off after this," for he and his chums used to earn pocket money that way. It was of no use to start out before the storm had ceased, however, so Tommy and his companions had fun out in the snow. The white flakes came down thicker and faster. Then came a sleety rain that froze on top, making a crust. Mr. TipTop was not at home that night, having been called away on business, and Tommy had a few friends over to his house. They went away early, when the storm was not yet at its worst, and before the crust had begun to form. "See you tomorrow," Tommy called to them, as he closed the front door against the wintry blast. "We'll have some more fun." In the middle of the night, Tommy's mother suddenly awakened him. He could hear the rattle of the sleet on the window as he jumped up, calling, "What's the matter, Mother? Has anything happened?" "It's Nellie," said Mrs. TipTop, with a sob in her voice. "She is very ill. I must have a doctor at once. It might be croup, but I thought she was too old for that. Oh, Tommy, do you think you could go for the doctor? I've tried to get him on the telephone, but I can't even get Central. I guess the wires are down. It is a terrible night, and I don't like to ask you to go out, but—" "Of course I'll go for the doctor," exclaimed Tommy, beginning to dress. He heard Nellie crying and coughing in her room. "I'll make him come back with me, too." "Tell him it's very important," urged Mrs. TipTop, as she hurried back to the little girl's room. Tommy wrapped himself up warmly, but did not take an umbrella, as he knew the wind would turn it inside out. He stepped from the front stoop, and at once his foot went through the hard crust on top of the snow. He sank away down. "Huh, this won't do," exclaimed Tommy. "I'd never make any headway crushing through the crust. I wonder what— Of course! My barrel-stave snowshoes. They're the very thing. I can walk on top of the crust with them and get there in a hurry." As he turned back into the house to get his odd snowshoes, a blast of icy wind, carrying the sleet with it, struck him full in the face. "It's a bad night," said Tommy to himself, as he closed the door. "What is the matter, Tommy?" asked his mother from the top of the stairs, as she heard him come back into the house. "Is it too bad a night for you to go?" "Sure not," he replied quickly. "It's not bad at all." Tommy did not want his mother to worry. "I just came back to get my barrel-stave snowshoes," he added. "I can walk on the crust with them, and I think I'll take a pair for the doctor to use coming back," he added. "Why, my dear boy," exclaimed his mother, "the doctor will use his horse coming back. He'll drive you here. Tell him Nellie has a high fever, and ask him to hurry. But he won't need your snowshoes." "Well, I'll take the extra pair along anyhow," said Tommy. "I might lose one of mine, or a strap might break. They're not heavy to carry." And he fastened his own snowshoes on in the house, slinging the others across his shoulders. The storm seemed to be worse as Tommy went out into it again. The wind drove the cutting sleet into his face, and the weather was very cold. But Tommy started out bravely, and he found, to his delight, that the barrel staves came in very useful. But for them, it is doubtful if he could have made any progress. It was about a mile to the house of Dr. Kent, the physician the TipTops had always had whenever any one of them was ill. There were other doctors nearer at hand, but Tommy thought it was better to have their own, as he understood Nellie's ailments. Then, too, the lad reflected, when he was started, he might as well go a mile as a half, for it would not make much difference, and a strange physician might not come so readily, especially in the storm, as Dr. Kent would. "So I'll just get Dr. Kent," mused Tommy. He slid along on his odd snowshoes, sometimes over deep drifts, and again on places where there was scarcely any snow or sleet, as the wind had swept it off. "My, it certainly does blow!" exclaimed Tommy, as a fiercer blast than usual nearly carried him off his feet. "But I guess I can stand it." As he went past the house of the first physician, he saw that it was dark, no lights being visible. "I suppose Dr. Kent will be in bed, too," he reflected. "Well, I'll have to get him up, that's all. Nellie has to have a doctor." On through the storm he went, fighting against the icy blast and the stinging sleet until he reached his destination. He took off his snowshoes before he went up the big porch of the physician's house, for the steps had been swept clear of snow by the gale. Tommy rang the bell. "Well, what is it?" a voice asked almost in his ear a little later. Tommy jumped. He thought the physician was beside him, until he happened to think of the speaking tube that adjoined the bell. Dr. Kent had called down to him through that. "I'm Tommy TipTop," replied our hero, into the mouthpiece of the tube. "Nellie is very sick. Will you come right away?" There was an instant's pause, and then the doctor made reply. "Come in, Tommy. Wait in the hall for me. I'll be right down." As he finished speaking, the front door clicked and opened a trifle. Tommy knew how that was done. By pressing a button in his room, the doctor could release the catch of the lock, allowing the door to open. It is an attachment used in many houses in cities when persons do not want to come downstairs to open the door, but it is not so common in the country. Knocking the snow off his shoes, Tommy entered, and closing the door against the cold wind, waited in the dimly lighted hall, for the doctor burned his gas all night. "I'll be with you in a moment, Tommy," the physician called to the lad, and Tommy could hear him moving about upstairs. "How is the weather?" the doctor asked. "Well, it isn't summer," replied Tommy, "but I guess we can stand it. I got here all right." "Oh, I don't mind, but I don't like to take my horse out in the storm." Finishing the buttoning of his coat as he came down the stairs, Dr. Kent got his medicine case from his office across the hall, and then peered out through the partly opened front door. "My, it is bad," he exclaimed. "I don't see how I can drive Dobbin through a storm like this, but I'll try. Can you help me hitch up, Tommy? I let my man have a night off, not thinking I'd be called out, but I guess between us we can get Dobbin into the shafts." "Yes, I'll help," replied Tommy, watching the doctor put on his big overcoat. "Brr! Listen to that wind," exclaimed the physician, as a blast fairly shook the house. "I certainly hate to take Dobbin out. I wish—" "Say," interrupted Tommy quickly, "maybe you could come to our house the same way as I got here, on the barrel-stave snowshoes." "Barrel-stave snowshoes?" exclaimed the doctor in surprise. "Yes, these," went on Tommy, showing the articles to the physician. "We boys make 'em. They're fine for going on the crust, and there's plenty of crust tonight. I brought along an extra pair thinking you might want to use 'em." The doctor examined the odd shoes. Then he laughed. "Well, I declare," he exclaimed. "I believe I will use these. They'll be just the thing, and that will save taking Dobbin out. Besides, we can start at once now. How do you put them on?" Tommy showed the physician, who quickly adjusted the barrel staves on his feet. Tommy did the same, and thus equipped, they started out into the storm. "My, it's worse than I thought it was," declared Dr. Kent, as he followed our hero. "How do the snowshoes work?" cried Tommy, above the noise of the wind. "Fine, Tommy. How did you come to think of these?" "Jack Fordyce, the muskrat trapper, gave me the idea. Lots of us boys have 'em," replied the lad, as he waited for the doctor to catch up to him. "Well, it takes you boys to do things. Now come on. I've got the idea of them now, and I can use them better." Together they slid along on the crust. The wind was at their backs, and this made it easier to get along. Tommy and the doctor did not talk much, for they needed all the breath they had. In silence they plunged ahead. "Well, here we are," exclaimed Tommy at length, when he saw the lights of his house shining across the sleety crust. "I hope Nellie is better." "So do I," agreed the doctor. "I'll soon have her in comfort, though. This was certainly better than waiting to hitch up Dobbin. Besides, I doubt if he could have pulled us along. His hoofs would have cut right through the crust. Wait until I get these things off, and let me take them off for you, interrupted Tommy, for he had already unstrapped his own snowshoes as he stood on the porch, and in a few seconds he had removed the doctor's. "Oh, I'm so glad you came," exclaimed Mrs. TipTop as she saw the physician. "Poor Nellie is so ill. Was it very bad coming?" "Oh, not with Tommy's snowshoes. They were great. Now I'll see to Nellie." Dr. Kent started up the stairs. "Shall I help, Mother?" asked Tommy. No, dear. I don't believe I'll need you. Mrs. Blake from next door saw the lights and came in, thinking something was wrong. She's going to stay until morning. She came around the back way where the snow isn't so deep. You go to bed, Tommy, and get some sleep." "Yes, that's a good idea," put in the doctor. "We'll call you if we need you." Tommy was glad enough to go, but he was anxious about Nellie, whom he could still hear crying. He was lying awake some time later, worrying about his sister, when his mother softly slipped into his room. "It's all right, Tommy, dear," she whispered, when a movement on Tommy's part showed her that he was not asleep. "Nellie is much better now. At least she is resting quietly. The doctor is going to stay until morning. He says it is nothing serious. I just thought I'd tell you, so you'd sleep better." "Thanks, Mother. I will." And as she kissed him, his eyes were already closing in slumber, for he was very tired. Nellie was much better when daylight came, and the doctor went away, promising to call again. He left some medicine to be given by Mrs. TipTop. Dr. Kent did not have to go back home on Tommy's queer snowshoes, for the storm was over, and one of the big 4-horse snowplows, used by the town, had broken the road, so the medical man could walk comparatively easy. "But those barrel-stave shoes are certainly fine," he said to Tommy as he left. Nellie was much improved during the day, and Tommy, who had been kept home from school during the forenoon session, went to his class after dinner. He met his chums and told them about his night trip for the doctor. "Weren't you afraid?" asked Joey Grubb. "Of what?" inquired Tommy. Of its being so late at night." "Of course not. Why should I?" Joey could give no reason. After school, finding that he was not needed at home, Tommy started out to shovel snow. Some of his chums did the same thing, and they earned considerable pocket money before dark. The weather was milder after the storm. Then came a rain that took the snow from the ice on the river, and it was followed by a freeze. "Skating again," remarked Tommy to Teddy and Sammy one day at school. "Let's go up the river this afternoon as far as Hemlock Island, fellows. I'd like to see that camp." "Yes, I guess we can," agreed Teddy. "It won't take us long. We'll get a crowd and go. But don't you fall in again, Tommy." "I won't," he promised with a laugh. "But say, I wish we fellows could go camping on the island for a day or so." "How could we?" asked Joey Grubb, who had joined the three. "Easily enough," replied Tommy, "if our folks would let us. We could take along some things to eat, say, early some Saturday morning, and stay until night. We could make a fire and cook and—" "Yes," put in Joey, "but Mr. Wentworth and some of the other men who own the camp wouldn't let us. There are half a dozen of them who use the log cabin, and they wouldn't let us fellows in." "How do you know?" inquired Tommy. "Did you ever ask them?" "No, we never did." "Then I'm going to," decided our hero. "I'm going to see Mr. Wentworth and ask him, as a favor, to let us camp there one day. It will be jolly fun." "He'll never do it," predicted Sammy, as Tommy hurried off. His chums followed slowly along. The hardware man looked surprised at Tommy's request, made to him a little later. "Let you boys use our camp, huh?" he repeated, glancing over the top of his spectacles. "Yes," replied Tommy. "If you please, we would be careful not to damage anything." "Well, now, I have never thought of letting boys in our camp," said Mr. Wentworth. "But I don't know as it's a bad idea, Tommy. What about your folks? Will they let you go?" "I haven't asked them yet, but I'm sure they would. It isn't very cold there, is it? It would only be for a day." "No, it isn't so cold. And there's a good stove and an open fireplace, where we men build a big blaze. There's lots of wood around the cabin, too. You could burn that." "Oh, are you really going to let us use the camp?" cried Tommy in delight. "Well, I don't see any objection." "Oh, I can't thank you enough," cried Tommy, impulsively holding out his hand to the hardware man. Oh, that's all right, exclaimed Mr. Wentworth with a laugh. Go ahead. Get your things ready and go up any day you like. Here is the key. Oh, thanks, cried Tommy as he hurried from the store. Going to start now? Asked the merchant. No, but I'm going to tell the fellows the good luck. None of 'em believed I could get your permission. Oh, I'm not as fussy as that, said Mr. Wentworth. I might have let them go up before if any of them had asked me. But I guess it takes Tommy TipTop to do things around here, he added, as our hero left the store. Well, asked Teddy, when Tommy had rejoined him and the others. How about it? They had been waiting around the corner from the hardware store. Can we go? Inquired Sammy. I knew he wouldn't let us, put in Joey Grubb. That's where you're wrong, exclaimed Tommy with a laugh. Look at that. And he held up the key. What is it? Asked Teddy. Key to the cabin. We can go any time we want to. Say, it'll be great. We must all ask our folks now, then get some things ready to take along. Things to eat, you know. I'm sure my father and mother will let me go. Well, I'm not so sure about mine, but I'm going to ask them, said Joey. And the others also said that they, too, would seek the necessary permission. They were so excited over the prospect that they did not carry out their plan of skating to the island. News of what Tommy had done was known to all the boys in the school in the next few days, and nearly every one of those with whom our hero was particularly chummy wanted to join the camping party. Tommy did not very well see how they all could go, but the question was solved for him, as most of the fathers and mothers refused the permission to their sons. However, Joey Grubb, Teddy Bunker, and Sammy Sandglass, to their delight, were allowed to go. And with Tommy, this made a party of 4. Just the right number, too, declared Sammy, as the boys were on their way to school one morning. Now when can we go, Tommy? Why, if the weather doesn't come off too cold, we'll go this Saturday. Today is Monday, and that will give us plenty of time to get ready. We can skate up the river to the island and put our food and other things on sleds to pull after us. There are enough bedclothes there to keep us warm, in case we want to take a nap, Mr. Wentworth said. Take a nap? Interrupted Teddy. I'm not going to sleep when we get there. I'm going to have some fun and go hunting. What with? Asked Sammy. You haven't a gun. Well, I've got a bow and arrow, and maybe we can get a rabbit or a fox. I heard there were some on the island. No sleep for me. Well, I thought we might want to play we were camping at night, spoke Tommy. That's why I mentioned the bedclothes. And there are dishes and things to cook with, so all we have to take are things to eat. Oh, I wish we were all going today, exclaimed Joey. It's a long time to wait till Saturday. Oh, it will soon come, declared Tommy. Say, he added, we'd better hurry, or we may be too late to class. As they neared the school, they saw a crowd of boys and girls coming out. Hello! Something's wrong, cried Tommy. Look at 'em all leaving. Maybe it's a fire, suggested Teddy, starting to run toward the building. There's no smoke, said Joey. Something has happened, exclaimed Tommy. See, there are some of the teachers coming out, too. The 4 began running. What's the matter? What happened? Was there a fire? Is anyone hurt? Tommy and his 3 chums asked questions of Billy Ruggler, who was the first boy they met. Leak in the steam boiler, explained Billy, with a smile on his face. They can't get up any heat, and the rooms are as cold as Greenland. There isn't going to be any school this week. It will take that long to fix the boiler. Oh, wow! Talk about luck, eh? No school? Come on! Let's get up a snow fight, Tommy. No school for a week, repeated Tommy slowly. And maybe longer, if they can't get the boiler fixed, added Billy. Talk about luck. How'd it bust? Joey wanted to know. I didn't hear, answered Billy. But come on, there's no use keeping on to school. I'm telling you the truth. Don't you believe me? For Tommy was still walking toward the building, out of which the pupils continued to come. Sure, I believe you, replied our hero. I just wanted to see the busted boiler, that's all. There's nothing to see, declared Billy. All us fellows looked in the basement, after the principal told us about it, when we were playing in the yard, before we went to our rooms. The boiler's busted inside somewhere. I'm glad, too, because I didn't have my homework in arithmetic done, and Miss Clark would be sure to keep me in. I tell you, that's just great luck, all right. No school for a week. Come on, let's have a snow fight. Tommy, Teddy, Joey, and Sammy looked at each other. Then they all turned around and started away together as they thought of the same thing. Where are you going? Asked Billy. Aren't you going to have that snow fight? No, Tommy called back over his shoulder. If there's no school, we can go camping tomorrow instead of waiting until Saturday. That's what, cried Joey. Say, I wish I was going with you, exclaimed Billy in wistful tones, but my folks won't let me. I'll go in the summertime, though, if you get up a camp, Tommy. Maybe I will. Sorry you can't go, Billy. So long. Say, this just fits in with our plans all right, eh? Exclaimed Sammy as the four walked along. It sure does, agreed Joey. We can get our eating things ready and start early tomorrow morning. Let's go as soon as it's daylight. Oh, I wish we could go now and stay all night. My mother said she wouldn't care if I did, as long as it was warm. Well, we can't change our plans now, said Tommy. We haven't time. Besides, I only asked Mr. Wentworth for the camp for one day, though I don't suppose he'd mind if we stayed longer. I guess my folks would let me camp overnight, and maybe we will do that sometime. Now let's see what we'd better take. Come on down to my house, and my mother will help us decide. We can talk it over down there. The boys were soon deep in a discussion of what they had better provide for themselves in the way of food. My goodness, you'll have enough for a week if you take all that, exclaimed Mrs. TipTop with a laugh, as she looked at the list the boys had written out. Why, you're only going to have 2 meals there, aren't you? 3, Mother, explained Tommy. You see, we're going to start very early, and we'll only eat a little breakfast at home. We'll get a regular breakfast when we get to the camp. Then there's dinner to get, and supper, and we may want a lunch in the afternoon before supper. We want to take some meat to cook, and some canned baked beans, and things like that. Oh, but you have twice as much as you need, objected his mother. I guess not, spoke Joey Grubb with a sigh. We'll get awful hungry, being out in the air, and I always have a good appetite, even around home. That's right, agreed Teddy and Sammy. Well, have it your own way about it, replied Mrs. TipTop. What you don't eat, you can bring back with you, I suppose. We won't bring much back with us, declared Tommy in confidence. They packed some of their food up that day, using grocery boxes, which were to be fastened on their sleds to be hauled over the ice. They even wanted to pack up the bread, cake, and pies overnight, but Mrs. TipTop told them they would get too dry, so they left them in the tin box in Tommy's house to be wrapped up early in the morning. The lads were to meet at Tommy's for the start. Tommy did not sleep soundly that night, as he was so anxious to awaken early. But toward morning he fell into a doze, to be aroused by a shout under his window. Hello! What's the matter? Is it a fire? He cried, jumping out of bed. I guess it's the boys coming after you to go camping, said his mother from across the hall. I'm dressed, Tommy, and I'll go down and let them in. They got ahead of you, but I let you sleep, as you were restless early in the night. Get dressed now, and I'll help you finish packing. All right, Mother. Thanks, answered Tommy. He lost little time getting into his warmest suit, and then calling goodbye to his father and Nellie, who were not yet up, Tommy hurried downstairs. Now be careful, son, his father warned him. Don't take any risks. Don't fall through the ice again, and if it storms, keep good and warm. I will, he promised. Bring me a live rabbit if you catch one, requested Nellie. Sure, agreed Tommy with a laugh. How's the weather out? Asked Tommy of his 3 chums, whom he found in the dining room, drinking hot coffee, which his mother had made. Pretty cold, remarked Teddy. And it seems as if it was going to snow, added Joey. The boys had their skates, and each one carried a package of food. They had divided among themselves the different articles each was to provide. Mrs. TipTop helped them pack the things in the 2 boxes that were to go on the sleds. Tommy made a hasty breakfast, and then the lads were ready to set out for camp. Don't come back too late tonight, cautioned Mrs. TipTop, as they slipped out of the house in the gray dawn of the morning. We'll be back, unless we get snowed up, replied Tommy with a laugh, and he little knew how prophetic his words were destined to be.